Three groups of campers went into the woods looking for solitude. None of them stayed the full night. These are the accounts of what forced them to pack up in the dark and why they refused to go back. Each story comes from people who say this is exactly how they remember it happening. Deep forest camping is supposed to mean silence. For one couple, the silence was the problem, because it meant they could hear exactly what was walking outside. They were camping midweek. The campground was nearly empty. By midnight, they had zipped up the tent and gone to sleep. Sometime later, the woman woke up. Footsteps. Heavy boots crunching on gravel. At first, she assumed it was another camper heading toward the restroom. But the footsteps didn't fade into the distance. They grew louder. They walked right up to the tent, and then passed by. She waited for them to leave. A few minutes later, the footsteps returned. The same heavy crunch. Only this time, as they passed the tent, they slowed down. She remembers staring at the faint outline of the tent ceiling, trying to steady her breathing. Every sound felt amplified. The wind in the trees, the fabric shifting as the night air moved. Later, she said the hardest part wasn't the fear. It was not knowing how long it would last. Seconds felt stretched. Minutes felt impossible to measure. She lay completely still. Her partner eventually woke up beside her. Neither of them spoke. They just listened as the person outside walked back and forth, slowing down every single time they passed the thin fabric of the tent wall. Then it stopped. Suddenly, a beam of light flashed against the tent wall. Bright white. Someone was shining a flashlight directly at them from just inches away. It stayed there for a heartbeat, and then snapped off. After that, nothing. No footsteps walking away. Just silence. When they unzipped the tent at sunrise, they found footprints circling their campsite. They didn't belong to anyone nearby. They packed up and left immediately. They say they still think about that night whenever they hear footsteps in the dark. Another group had chosen a wooded area they'd visited for years, a place they believed was safe. Late into the night, conversation around the campfire slowly faded. That's when one of them noticed something beyond the flames. Standing just outside the firelight was a man. He wasn't moving. He was just watching them. The fire cracked softly beside them, suddenly much louder than before. No one reached for their phone. No one moved. According to them, it felt wrong to break eye contact, even though none of them could explain why. They assumed he was another camper. One of them called out, asking if he needed help. There was no response. The man didn't shift his weight. He didn't react. He stood so still he almost blended into the trees behind him. They called out again. Still nothing. After an uncomfortable amount of time, the man finally moved. He took one slow step backward, then another. He never turned around. He simply faded into the darkness until he was gone. They put out the fire immediately and went straight to their tents. None of them slept. By morning, the area where the man had been standing was empty. No footprints, no nearby campsite. They left with the feeling that they hadn't been seen by accident, but deliberately observed. Another camper was alone near a remote trailhead. He didn't hear anything while he slept. It wasn't until the next day that he realized how close someone, or something, had been. He had left his phone recording overnight to capture nature sounds and went to sleep early. When he listened to the recording the next morning, everything sounded normal. Until just after 3 a.m. That's when the audio changed. Heavy breathing. It wasn't an animal sniffing the ground. The sound was uneven, rhythmic, wet, disturbingly familiar. Too close, too steady to ignore. It sounded like it was coming from directly outside the thin nylon wall of the tent. The breathing continued for several seconds, and then stopped instantly. No footsteps walking away, just silence. He later said listening to it felt worse than hearing it live, because there was no adrenaline, No confusion. Just the realization that something had been there while he slept. When he checked the campsite, nothing looked disturbed. No tracks. No signs of wildlife. He deleted the recording shortly after. He says he regrets doing that now, because to this day he has no explanation for what was standing so close to him in the dark. In another case, a pair of brothers camped along a Forest Service road in late fall. They chose the spot because it was far from marked campsites and completely quiet. That quiet didn't last. They were sitting near a low fire when one of them noticed movement deeper in the trees. Too far away to see clearly, but close enough to feel wrong. At first, they thought it was an animal. Then it stopped moving. Whatever it was, stood upright. They watched it without speaking. It didn't approach. It didn't retreat. It just stayed there, partially hidden behind a tree, as if it didn't need to come any closer. One of the brothers called out, trying to sound casual. No response. The shape shifted slightly, not a step, more like a slow lean, as if it were adjusting its view. Later they said the most unsettling part wasn't fear. It was how patient it seemed. It wasn't pacing. It wasn't making noise. It was just waiting. When one of them added wood to the fire and the flames flared brighter, the shape slipped backward, quietly disappearing between the trees. No footsteps. No sound of brush moving. They packed up and left while it was still dark. Both brothers agree that if they had stayed longer, whatever had been watching them would eventually have come closer. The last group had camped near a river bend. They set up late and went to sleep almost immediately. Sometime during the night, one of them woke up. Not from a sound, but from movement. The side of the tent jerked inward, hard enough to brush against his arm. The entire tent shook once, then went still. Seconds later, it happened again. A heavy push from the outside, like someone leaning their full weight against the fabric. No voices. No laughter. No footsteps. He whispered to his friends. Both of them were already awake, staring at the tent wall. Then came a slow, dragging sound along the side of the tent. Fabric stretching. Stakes creaking slightly in the ground. Whatever was outside circled them once. They waited for it to leave. Instead, the pressure returned, this time on the opposite side. Slow, deliberate, testing. None of them screamed. None of them spoke. They later said it felt like making noise would invite something worse. Eventually, the pressure stopped. They stayed awake until sunrise. When they unzipped the tent, the ground around them was disturbed, but not in any clear way. No footprints. No tracks. Just flattened grass. They left without eating breakfast. All of them agree on one thing. Whatever was out there was strong enough to knock the tent over, but chose not to. Whether these encounters involved people, animals, or something else entirely, none of these campers stayed long enough to find out. They packed up early, and none of them ever returned. If you've ever camped in a remote area, you know how thin that tent wall really is. Try to remember that the next time you close your eyes in the dark.